Bob, it's been another really robust year for M&A here in the U.S., especially as it relates to mega deals. What are you seeing as some of the key themes that investors are facing in terms of today's environment?
This is a market right now that we've never seen before. Divestitures are up 40%, corporate divestitures so far this year. There is a constant look at the portfolio and churning of assets. In addition to that, with all that's going on with technology and the amount of investment that's required to maximize the competitiveness within your value chain, the more value chains, different value chains that an organization has, so a larger conglomerate, the more complex, the more expensive, the more investment capacity is required to effectively compete going forward. So you see a minimizing back down to the core.
So what I'm hearing, Bob, is increasingly complex environment, especially at a strategic angle, and quite simply focus on the core of your business. Absolutely. As you approach M&A. I guess another one of the key trends that we're seeing does relate to cross-sector deals. And again, that's I think about a third of overall deal volumes these days. One of the interesting areas that we've seen a lot more activity is cross-sector consumer, as a matter of fact.
Interestingly, on consumer, there are new things happening in the market, new best practices, new trends. In the consumer space, there's a significant amount of consumer data being captured and lots of creative, technological, analytical ways of analyzing all this non-financial data, if you will, relative to implications on value. We are now capable of scraping not just all social media on the web, but also the dark web to really find out what is the consumer sentiment anywhere in the world.
Let's move on to the regulatory environment a little bit. And obviously one of the key elements of the changes in regulatory environment in the last 6 months has been the tax reform. What are you seeing as some of the key elements or key forces with respect to tax reform and the M&A environment?
You can't just look at tax reform in isolation. It's got to be thought of and brought together in the context of interest rates, cost of labor, where an unemployment rate is, inflation, trade war implications in terms of rising costs. You've got to look in the context of the bigger geopolitical environment of which the tax reform is an important element of that. The other thing I would say is tax models at every company are getting redone.
Right.
And
for the first time in years in a lot.
For the first
decades,
time in
maybe,
years. And there's still a lot of unknowns within those models. But when those models start to change, we need to make sure, organizations need to make sure that their tax organizations and their corporate development organization are talking. Mm-hmm.
Let's talk a little bit more about the rest of the regulatory environment. And again, there's a lot going on. We have antitrust issues and trade issues and privacy issues. Are there one or two that you think are really going to be more important than others as we roll through the rest of 2018 and into 2019?
Clearly, the AT&T transaction is a bellwether. The administration has demonstrated a willingness to approve transactions that for the last couple of years, there's been a lot of concern about would those get approved or not.
Especially, Bob, as it relates to the vertical related integrations, which, as you suggest, are not limited just to entertainment and media, but affect other sectors as well, including healthcare, importantly. What are you seeing as the forces going forward with respect to the remainder of 2018 and as we go into 2019?
All signs are pointing to a continued strong market from an M&A standpoint. The market is rewarding inorganic growth. I think that's going to keep values strong. I think it's going to keep competition strong. There is more capital, $1.5 trillion of private equity uninvested capital, really strong corporate balance sheets. There's going to be continued transaction activity, and it takes a while for things to cycle through an economy. GDP on its own is not going to drive the kind of growth that organizations need to drive. So there's always going to be supplementing more and more with inorganic growth activity.
So continuation of mega deals, overall bullish on M&A activity as we go into 2019. The end of the cycle isn't in sight quite yet. Nope. And given some of these other more macro factors, valuations may moderate a little bit, but probably will hang with us at some decently high levels for some time to come.